Alright YouTube, I hope you're all doing well, and today we're going to talk about my favorite camera right now, the Nikon Zfc. It's the camera that is filming me right now, so I can't physically hold it and show it to you, but I will show you some nice b-roll. It's the camera that I use primarily for my YouTube channel and for all my stills. I don't have a second camera right now, but I'm planning on getting one just for filming purposes on this channel, but this will come on the future as we grow further and further. So pretty much I'm using this camera for the past 3 months for all my video and for all my stills photography. I use this camera for client work, for portrait shots, for jewelry shots. I use this camera inside the rain, inside the snowstorm, for landscape shots, for street photography, for travel photography. Call it whatever you want. I have tested this camera in almost every single situation. I have not used it for sports, but I never shoot sports, so that's something I cannot talk about. Basically, I'm more qualified to talk about this camera than every other YouTuber, reviewer that uses camera once in their lifetime and rushes to make a silly review about this camera without even using it in daily basis. So let's first and foremost speak about the build quality of this camera, about how it feels in the hand. Let me tell you that this is not the most comfortable camera to hold in your hands. It's really lightweight, which is a plus. It feels like you're holding nothing, especially if you come from a DSLR like I do. This camera feels so light in the hands, and this really makes my life easier, but it doesn't have a grip built-in, which makes it really hard to hold on for a lot of time. You get used to it, but your hands later on, they don't feel like they were holding something comfortable. I highly suggest to get a grip for you guys if you plan on buying this camera. Smallrick are making some really nice grips for this camera, and I will definitely buy one for myself because it's really a pain in the ass holding this camera. Other than that, to be honest, the camera feels a little bit plasticky. It doesn't feel that much sturdy, to be honest. It has a nice rubber feeling on it, not something soft, but it has a nice rubber feeling on it. And also these silver outlines, they're not made out of metal, they're made of some kind of high quality plastic, which also helps making the camera lighter. And I think I prefer this plasticky version of the camera. Yeah, you can go a whole day shooting and it feels like you're holding paper. In regards of build quality, it's a really light camera for everyday use, which is really great for traveling or street photography, but it doesn't feel good in the hands. That's all I have to say. So as you probably can see, this camera is built based on the old cameras of Nikon, this vintage look that Nikon has to offer, or let's say had to offer. We have a lot of dials on top so we can control the shutter speed and the ISO, and we also have a nice button placement on the back next to the screen. We also have a customizable button on the front of the camera on the body, which you can easily use with your finger when you're shooting, when you're holding the camera. And yeah, I really like the button placement on this camera. What I don't like about this camera are the dials on top of it. I know they bring out an aesthetic feeling with this body, and I really love looking at them. They're really aesthetically pleasing, but in order to use them, you also have to press the button that is on top of them in order to squeeze them. And yeah, this is really a pain in the ass. This really slows down the camera. I know you can argue that this camera is for slower shooting to bring you back in time, but I would love to play with these dials without having to press the button. If I could just turn them like that without the button stopping them, then I would absolutely love these dials. That's why I don't use the original shutter speed dial, and I have transferred the shutter speed control ring on one of the traditional dials on the back of the body, so I can quickly change the shutter speed with not having to press a button and turning a dial. I'm going to be completely honest with you guys over here. I'm going to tell all the negatives and all the positives of this camera, and the dials are something that are really aesthetically pleasing, and they can really offer you this old-fashioned shooting experience, but the buttons that they have on top of them that are stopping them from turning, this is something that I don't really like. So let's continue on by talking with the screen that this camera has to offer. And basically this camera comes with a fully articulating screen. This really makes our life easier. It's really helpful for photography. It's really helpful for filming yourself like I'm doing right now. Basically I can tilt the screen and I can see that I'm in focus right now and that the camera follows my eye, and yeah, this really makes my life easier. And if you're planning on filming yourself or taking selfies or even shooting on lower corners and stuff like that, this screen will make your life so much easier. and yeah, it's basically one of the best screens that you can find at this price point. So before we get to the point where we talk about the photography and the videography experience of this camera, let's quickly talk about the battery life that this camera has to offer. And basically the batteries that are coming with this camera, they're pretty solid, to be honest. I can go a full day of shooting just pictures without even having the battery dying on me, so this is a huge plus for me. Coming from a DSLR where the batteries are supposed to be better, I don't really see the huge difference over here. But when you record video, 4K video and stuff like that, then yeah, you will probably need a second battery for the day, and you don't really need the third one, but just in case, get one. So now that we have everything out of the way, let's talk a little bit about the photography section that you can experience with this camera. Basically this camera comes with a crop sensor. It's not a full frame, you guys, but this is not a deal breaker, and nobody's judging my pictures based on, oh my god, you're shooting with a crop sensor, oh my god, you're not shooting with a full frame. Nobody can really tell the difference if I'm shooting with a full frame or not. And to be honest, I would love for this camera to be a full frame on this vintage body, so we can get this extra squeeze of quality. I have used this camera, as I said before, in many situations. I have used it for client work. I have done a lot of portraits for some clients the past 3 months. I have also used it for some jewelry shots that I had to do. And as I said before, I have also used it in some harsh conditions, mainly in snow and also in the rain. You have to know that this camera is not weather sealed, so I always use a plastic bag in order to protect this camera when I'm shooting in these situations, but it always performed really great. And last but not least, I think the best situation for this camera to shoot at are the streets. This camera is amazing for street photography, you guys. It's really small, so you don't draw a lot of eyes on you. Let's say with the DSLR, if you're holding it, everyone can see this big chunk of a brick that you're holding. This camera over here with a kit lens or with a 28mm kit lens that Nikon is offering, it's a really amazing combo for street photography. It's blazingly fast, it does the job great, and yeah, the whole experience with holding this camera, this vintage beautiful looking camera on your hands, just makes the whole street photography experience a lot better. What I really want to address right now is that the looks of this camera can be deceiving. So this camera looks like it's an old camera, it's a slow camera, but to be honest, it's a pretty fast camera. You can shoot at around 10 frames per second if I'm not mistaken, and also the autofocus is pretty good, to be honest. I don't know why Nikon gets so much hate. The eye autofocus works perfectly. I can see the video right now, it's following me for the majority of the time, and it's not missing focus right now. It's pretty darn good. I'm using this for my portrait shoots, so yeah, I don't lose focus almost never. The camera struggles just a little bit to find the eye when the person is far away, but this happens with almost every camera. I mean, it's almost impossible to find the eye when the head is that small on the frame. So yeah, I don't have any issues with this camera. Maybe if I take 10 shots in a row, I will miss 1 or 2 if the person comes close to me or goes far away from me. And again, for street photography, the autofocus is really helpful. To be honest, in street photography, I don't let the camera decide where to focus on itself. I mostly use dynamic area AF or single point AF paired with AFC, autofocus continuous. And yeah, I never really felt in the past 3 months that I have taken a shot and it was autofocus, to be honest. So yeah, I highly recommend this camera if you want to shoot some casual portraits here and there. The eye autofocus is beautiful, it works really well, it rarely misses, and as I said earlier, for street photography the experience is pretty beautiful, especially with this blazing fast autofocus and with this beautiful camera in your hands. Also, since we're talking about autofocus all this time, let me quickly add that this camera has to offer an animal AF. Yeah, this mode really works for cats and dogs and stuff like that. It's struggling with some other species of animals. Let's say for ducks, it couldn't really find the eyes of the duck, so I'm thinking that the algorithm is only prepared for cats and dogs and land animals, but I have not tested it that much, so I can't really talk about this mode. I'm not a wildlife photographer, but occasionally I will shoot some cats here and there. And if you want to shoot your pets with this mode, it will do a pretty amazing job. You don't have to worry about it. It doesn't work like the people eye AF. The camera can find the human eye way quicker than the animal eye, but again, at this price point, it's even a plus that we even have this mode. Many cameras don't even offer that, and again, if you have some pets, this is a pretty great tool for you. So the last thing that you probably need to know about the image quality that this camera has to offer is the nighttime performance. As a crop sensor camera, obviously it will produce more noise than a full frame camera, so you have to keep this in mind. But again, coming from a DSLR crop sensor camera myself, I can see huge improvements on the ISO performance on this camera. To be honest, I have taken many shots in low light that you can see right now, and with a little bit of editing, these shots look perfectly fine to me. I'm really pleased with the low light performance that we get out of this camera, and maybe in the future when we get some faster light from Nikon, then we can elevate the performance of this camera even more. I have not used it yet for astrophotography, which I really love, but the summer is just around the corner, and if you want to see the Milky Way captured with this tiny crop sensor body, then subscribe in this channel. Sooner or later I will go for a trip and capture the beauty of the night sky. So yeah, if you're interested in this kind of things, join the family, subscribe. But again, if you want the best of the best with honor image quality during nighttime, then you obviously have to go with a full frame. Also, if you just shoot and post your pictures on Instagram, then you probably don't need the nighttime performance of a full frame. You can pretty much just save some money and go with this crop sensor camera or any other crop sensor camera and just make your life easier. We also have to consider the 20 megapixels that come with the sensor. Basically, the lower the megapixel count is, especially on a crop sensor camera, usually this will help you out a little bit more with the noise that the higher ISO is producing. I don't know if this is a myth or not, but 20 megapixels seem to be just about right for nighttime photography, and the resolution that you're getting out of this camera, despite the lower 20 megapixel count, is just simply out of this world. Coming again, I would say it a lot of times in this video, but coming again from a DSLR crop sensor body with even higher megapixel count, I can see a huge difference on the image quality with this camera. So unless you are planning on printing a huge wall or something like that, the 20 megapixels won't really be a problem for you. You can easily print your images and hang them on the wall or in photo books and stuff like that. They're perfect for social media use, obviously, and the fact that we only have 20 megapixels make the files way smaller than, let's say, a Sony R4, which has 64 megapixels and is around 100 gigabyte each photo, something like that. In this camera, we only get about 20 to 25, I think, megabytes per raw file. Don't get too obsessed about megapixels. Even phones come these days with 100 megapixels and stuff like that. Don't fall on this marketing trap, guys. 20 megapixels, 30 megapixels, it's basically the same on the naked eye. You really have to pixel peep in order to see minor differences. So yeah, don't get too worried about that. Alright, now that we have covered everything about the photography status of this camera, let's continue on with the video specs of this camera. But if you have any more questions about this camera, drop a comment down below and I will try to answer it as quickly as possible. Anyways, let's continue on, like I said, with the video specs of this camera. Basically, this camera comes with the maximum specs at 4K with 30 frames per second, and we also get 120 frames per second 1080p for some extreme slow motions and stuff like that. To be honest, this is not a high-end video camera. Obviously, it doesn't even have log, so if you want this high dynamic range and this really flexible editing experience, you won't really get it with this camera. This camera only offers a flat profile, which is really great for beginners, to be honest. And me myself, I'm not an experienced filmmaker. I have only taken one commission job on a video project, so yeah, I'm not the most capable person in order to talk about the high-end specs of this camera in regards of the video capabilities. But as a beginner, the flat profile really helps me out in color grading. It's a really easy flat profile in order to add contrast and shift the tones a little bit here and there. And I think if you're a beginner filmmaker, then a flat profile is more than enough for you to practice your skills. And let me say that this camera is perfect for any YouTuber, to be honest, because it has that screen that helps you look at yourself when you're filming. As you can see, I can come really close. The autofocus, as you could see, follows me right in the eye when I go. Sorry about the noise that my chair is doing, but if I go back and front, the focus is shifting pretty easily, so the autofocus is a pretty huge deal. If you want this camera just for vlogging, it's the perfect fit for you. It's lightweight, it has that articulating screen, and the autofocus is pretty great. And like I said earlier, the video quality is pretty sharp. I will come forward again so you can see the resolution that we get in the eye, and this is just with normal lighting that is coming from my window, you guys, at 800 ISO right now. I'm pretty happy with the image quality this chair did. As I said earlier, I'm pretty happy with the image quality that comes out of the video of this camera. It's the perfect entry-level YouTube camera for me, at least in my eyes. But as I said earlier, it's lacking the log option, which a lot of cameras in this price point, even crop sensor cameras, offer that. This is a huge pain in the ass if you're a filmmaker that color grades a lot your clips, but it is what it is. For a beginner videographer, it's perfect, to be honest. And about the nighttime video capabilities of this camera, it's nothing to write poems about it, but with the right lighting, you can pretty much get away with it. You can still vlog on dark locations, to be honest, but it's not terrible, it's not unusable. To be completely honest with you guys, the video capabilities of this camera are targeted mainly towards beginners. The image quality is pretty nice for every beginner out there, but the fact that it doesn't offer the log option, I think is a huge deal breaker for any experienced filmmaker that wants to add this camera as a secondary camera or stuff like that. If you are just a YouTuber that wants to vlog or whatever, if you're just someone that wants to casually get some clips here and there, some high quality clips here and there, then this camera is perfect for you. And also the flat profile is pretty flexible for beginners in order to practice their color grading. Like me, in my personal use case, I will use the flat profile in order to exercise my color grading, and in about a year or so I will add a second dedicated video camera on my channel just for capturing higher quality clips that I can later on color grade with the knowledge that I have acquired by color grading this flat profile over here. Alright you guys, I had to refilm this part of the video where I talk about the lenses and the competition that this camera has to face in the camera market. I accidentally turned off my microphone and yeah, I was talking to nobody. So yeah, this is take 2, and yeah, let's begin by talking about the lens selection that we have available for this camera. Basically this is a huge minus, huge minus for this camera right now in March in 2022. The lens selection is a huge pain in the ass for us Nikon shooters, us APS-C Nikon shooters. Basically Nikon hasn't made any crop sensor lenses at all right now, maybe just a few lenses here and there, but that's just about it. We don't have any reasonable prime lenses, but here's where Viltrox steps in. Viltrox has made 3 prime lenses specifically for Nikon APS-C shooters, the 23mm 1.4, the 30mm if I'm not mistaken 1.4, and the 56mm 1.4. All 3 of those lenses are really cheap, and the build quality is out of this world considering the price point. The optical formula is decent, to be honest, and all 3 of those, they have an aperture of 1.4, which makes them really great for low light photography, for creating bokeh, for creating separation between your subject and the background. And it shows that Viltrox is hitting the whole of this market because nobody else makes right now lenses for Nikon APS-C shooters. Yeah, they're doing a pretty good job, and almost every Nikon APS-C shooter out there, they're buying at least 1 or 2 prime lenses for Viltrox. Me myself, I have also bought the 85mm 1.8. It's a full frame lens, but if you are a part of this channel, you do know that the 85mm is my favorite lens to use, even on a crop sensor camera. Outside of the Viltrox lenses, which I really recommend, we have the Nikon full frame prime lenses, the 50mm 1.8 and the 85mm 1.8, pretty overpriced in my humble opinion. Don't get me wrong, they are excellent lenses, but at this price point, I don't really think that it's worth it if you're trying to save money to get the Nikon prime lenses. If you have the money to spend, by no means go out there and spend it, but in my personal situation right now, I cannot justify to spend double or even triple the amount of money in order to get slower prime lenses. The good thing for Nikon APS-C shooters right now is that we have some excellent zoom lenses. The kit lens itself is pretty sharp, it has a really fast autofocus, and it also focuses silently. And also the telephoto zoom lens, the 55-200 if I'm not mistaken, is a pretty sharp lens, to be honest. It's a huge upscale from the past Nikon kit lens from the DSLR days. So yeah, if you can buy a kit where the Nikon Zfc comes with both of these lenses, I will definitely do that, but only do that if you know you have a use for the big telephoto lens. Lastly, Nikon announced a few weeks ago the 18-140 DX lens for us Nikon APS-C shooters. It's a super zoom lens. From what I have seen, it's a pretty sharp one as well. It's a huge improvement from the past generation of lenses once again. And if you are on a lookout for a lens to rule them all, let's say you want to go for a hiking trip or a few days vacation in an island or stuff like that, then this lens pretty much will cover all of your needs. Just remember that these super zoom lenses, they tend to be not so sharp as prime lenses. Obviously the aperture is pretty dark, and when you're shooting in low light the performance drops pretty drastically. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Super zoom lenses, they are pretty useful, and if this lens is something that you're into, then by all means go get it. Personally, I always prefer to collect some prime lenses and one fast zoom lens, but right now we have nothing that can substitute the kit lens, sadly. I would love if we could get let's say a Sigma 17-50 f2.8 or something like that, like the Sony shooters do, but it is what it is. Yeah, we have to keep waiting for better glass, and right now we can use the kit lenses and the Viltrox prime lenses. And lastly, let's talk about the competition that this camera has to face in the camera market. We have some major brands out there that competes with this camera. We have Fuji, we have Sony, and we also have the older brother of this camera, the Nikon Z50. So let's start talking about the Z50 for a moment. Basically, the Z50 is the same camera with the ZFC on a different body. Let me tell you that the ZFC feels absolutely great in the hands. It has a really deep grip that you can hold really comfortably in your hands, and this is a huge plus for me. But the screen is terrible, you guys. It's just a screen that drops from the lower end of the body, which is really strange for me. If you put this camera on a tripod like I am right now in order to film myself, I cannot see what I'm shooting because it flips below and it will hit on the tripod, and yeah, the tripod will cover the screen. So yeah, it's pretty useless. I don't know what they were thinking and used the screen, to be honest. Other than that, the Nikon ZFC has a slightly faster autofocus, and lastly the Nikon ZFC also has IAF on video mode, which the Nikon Z50 lacks. The Nikon Z50 only uses face detection in video mode. If you consider all these small upgrades from the Nikon ZFC to the Z50, in my personal opinion, the ZFC is worth it if you can spend this tiny amount of money more. If you can't, then by all means, the Nikon Z50 is a great camera, and you can even find the Z50 used on some places, which will make you save even more money if you are into something budget friendly and stuff like that. And then we have the Sony crop sensor lineup, which is pretty tough to beat, to be honest, especially the Sony a6-400. This camera is pretty impressive, you guys. The only bad thing that the Sonys have is the battery life, to be honest. The Sony a6-400 has a faster autofocus than the ZFC, slightly faster, but it's faster, to be honest. It has the same autofocus like the Sony a7 III, and as you know, Sony is the king of autofocus right now, especially on the mid-range of camera sales. And it also has the option to shoot in log in video mode, which is a little bit extra. You can also find the Sony a6-400 in the used market, which is also a huge plus for this camera. And the fact that they have such a big lens selection like the Sigmas and the Tamborons and the, I don't know, 7 Artisans and stuff like that, pretty value for mine, to be honest. In my eyes, Sony a6-400 is basically the second best camera under 1K that you can get. But it's an ugly ass camera, and the Nikon ZFC is beautiful. That's all I have to say for you Sony shooters out there. And lastly, in my opinion, the best camera that comes at the price point like the Nikon ZFC is the Fujifilm X-S10. Boy, this camera is insane. First of all, it has that nice Fujifilm design, and also this camera is pretty packed. Fuji gives us the option to shoot with log in video, and also this camera comes with IBIS. You heard it correctly. The Fuji X-S10 has an inbuilt image stabilization, which makes it such a great camera, even for video work, even for photography related stuff. Fuji has a pretty good autofocus. Maybe it's slightly worse than the Nikon ZFC, maybe not. From what I have seen with all these firmware updates and the stuff they are doing, it works pretty fine. Let's be honest here, we're not picking one of these cameras in order to go shoot LeBron James and Cristiano Ronaldo on a soccer field, but the only downside for Fuji shooters is that their lenses are as well or pretty much overpriced. So you have to rely again on Viltrox and on Sigma, which is releasing 3 of their excellent prime lenses for the Fuji shooters right now. But if you want the premium glass that Fuji is offering, yeah, you have to spend your money. So at the end of the day, this is the competition that the Nikon ZFC faces. If you really need the IBIS, go for the Fuji. If you really need the log option, go for the Sony. But if you really want to stick with Nikon and you have locked the ZFC into your eyes, then by all means, go for it. You won't regret it. Just remember to buy an extra grip for the camera. If you have any questions at all about this camera, drop them down below and I will try to answer that as soon as possible. Also, you guys do me a favor and drop a like down below. This really helps out with the algorithm. And also, if you want to learn more about photography and come alongside my photography adventures out in the field, on the streets, on the mountains and stuff like that, consider subscribing. We just passed the 1000 subscriber count the other month, And yeah, I'm really looking forward to see what this channel can become. Also, let me add here that I'm sorry for the lack of videos these past few weeks. It was a different period with exams and stuff like that, but I'm officially back and I will post again weekly on this channel. And I'm also really happy that you guys still use the hashtag #EliasYT. I will review it again from the next video, so keep using it. I love seeing your work. You guys are amazing. Thank you for everything that you're doing for me. You guys are changing my life and you don't even realize it. So once again, thank you. And I want to end the video by saying that I truly appreciate every single one of you that chooses to spend some of their time by watching my videos. This really means the world to me. And as always, take care, you guys. See you next time. Peace.